You know, when you think about gender equality in Asia, Taiwan often comes up as this shining example, right? But a recent controversy over the new government's cabinet has got everyone talking. It kind of peels back a layer on that progressive image, and you won't believe it. But it all boils down to two little numbers.
All right, so let's get right into it. The whole story here really hinges on these two numbers. And by themselves, okay, they're just stats on a page. But when you put them side by side, whoa, they paint a really complicated picture about who's actually calling the shots in Taiwan.
So here it is, the big paradox. On one hand, you've got Taiwan's legislature. Almost 42% of its members are women. I mean, that's one of the highest rates in all of Asia. Pretty amazing, right? But then you look over at the cabinet, where the real executive power is. And that number just falls off a cliff. So why is everyone suddenly talking about this gap? Well, it didn't just pop up overnight. It blew up into this huge national conversation because of a very specific promise, one that was made when the stakes were high, right on the campaign trail. Yeah, see, during his campaign, President Lai Ching-te, he laid it out there for everyone to see. He made a clear public goal. He said, we will aim for more than 1/3 of cabinet members to be women. A really clear benchmark, a promise of progress. Fast forward to May 2024. The new AI Action Cabinet is announced. Everyone's waiting to see the lineup. And the number that comes out? 23.5%. That's just 8 women out of 34 members in total. Okay, and this is where the plot really thickens. Because, yeah, 23.5% is way short of that 1/3 goal. No question about it. But, and this is a big but, it was also the highest percentage of women in the cabinet in almost 25 years. So what do you even call that? Is it a record-breaking achievement, or is it a flat-out broken promise? It's complicated. And that gap, the space between what was promised and what was delivered, it basically lit a fire under public opinion. The whole country just started debating, and man, there were strong feelings on both sides. When you boil it all down, the whole thing really split into two camps. On one side, you had the critics. For them, this was about a broken promise and, more importantly, about the need for different perspectives in government. Then, on the other side, you had the defenders, who are basically saying, hey, in a tough political world, merit and only merit is what should count. Groups like the Awakening Foundation, a major women's rights organization, were really leading the charge for the critics. Their whole point was, look, how can a government that doesn't reflect the population possibly understand the needs of that population? You end up with these massive blind spots in your policies. And they didn't just stop there. They brought up Taiwan's international commitments. See, Taiwan has adopted something called CEDAW. It's basically a UN treaty that says countries should be actively working to make sure women can participate equally in politics. So for the critics, this cabinet appointment just didn't live up to the spirit of that promise. Now, for the other side of the argument, there was this one phrase you heard over and over again. It became their rallying cry, shui xing, shui sheng. It means, quite simply, whoever is capable gets the job. And that phrase just perfectly captures their entire argument. This should be about pure merit. The people defending the decision were saying, look, the number one goal here is to build the most effective, most competent government we can, period. And, they made a pretty interesting point. Taiwan's politics can be really brutal. It's a tough, combative world, and it's incredibly hard to convince anyone, man or woman, to leave a great job in the private sector to step into that arena. So that brings us back to the big question. Why? Why is there this massive difference between the legislature and the cabinet? And as people kept talking, it became really clear that this wasn't just about one cabinet appointment. Nope. This was about something much bigger, something we call the glass ceiling. Yeah, the glass ceiling. I'm sure you've heard the term. It's that invisible barrier that stops qualified people from getting to the very top. And this whole situation, it's like a textbook example. It shows that you can have tons of women in politics, but there can still be this unseen wall that keeps them out of the most powerful positions. And when you dig into it, you see that women in Taiwanese politics face a totally different set of hurdles. They get put under this insane microscope for their appearance, their family life, stuff their male colleagues just don't deal with. They get hit with gendered insults like being called a flower vase, basically just for decoration. And they constantly have to prove they can handle the hard stuff like defense or finance.
And check this out. This is wild. You look at Japan and South Korea, right? They have way, way fewer women in their parliaments compared to Taiwan. And yet, both of those countries have had women in charge of defense and foreign affairs. Meanwhile, in Taiwan, a woman has never held either of those top jobs. It's a pretty powerful symbol of the kind of barriers we're talking about.
So let's step back for a second. What's really at stake here? I mean, why should we care about the number of women in a cabinet?
Because what this whole controversy really shows is that progress isn't a straight line. You can absolutely lead the way with a high number of women in one part of your government, but that doesn't just magically translate to equality everywhere, especially at the highest levels of power. Real, true equality, well, that means you have to actively go in and tear down the old structures and biases that are still in the way.
So, in the end, this whole thing isn't really about choosing merit or diversity. It's about asking a much bigger, much tougher question. If our goal is truly to find the absolute best person for the job, then what are the invisible barriers we all need to start tearing down so that the best person can actually be anyone?